programs is, well, we work with different innovative schools and teachers to build the skill sets associated with global competency. We do that through a few means. One, we use a blended model of in-person workshops, in-person classes, as well as online learning for different forms of preparation, followed by focused international travel experiences and some really interesting things. This is a lot of my connections to AEE for those sorts of things around the world. What I'd like to do today is a little bit of thinking and to sort of expose some of the thought processes that we go through in Envoys when we look at programming design, when we think about the contexts in which we're designing these learning experiences and go through. And I'm hoping to get a little bit of talking as soon as Dan gets some of the technical issues on, to hear from you, to hear about where you are and what you think about some of these issues and contexts that have come up. And we can have a little conversation about that. The main things to talk about that we're looking at covering today are moving from setting the context, just so we're all clear on sort of where the need is around this, and bring up one of the more interesting debates that we've been exposed to lately in global ed. To talk a little bit about pedagogical considerations when you're designing any kind of online learning experience or trying to affect students' preparation. To spend some time talking about how to curate content, to enable access to that content, and then finally, and really importantly, to talk about how to best enable interactions, how to make sure that people are able to talk to each other and to go about working across geospatial boundaries and geotemporal boundaries, but more importantly also to make sure they have reasons to do so. We'll get into that. Cool. So to start with setting the context, I wanted to start by noting some of the essential questions that we look after. And the big ones for us for this project and for this webinar are that we're thinking about ways that we help students gain content knowledge, that we help them understand new things about the world, but also to help them gain new skill sets. And I think it's very important when we engage in this kind of work and we're taking up people's time and asking students to do something new and take up some new time from them, that at any point that you're doing something new for an extended period of time, you're learning a particular skill. That for folks who are new to Zoom, you're learning how to use this particular software, and your choices of how you look at that software are quite important of what makes sense, what's worth learning how to do and what's not. And the final one we think a lot about is how do we foster new and positive mindsets, ways to have that growth mentality or grit, different things that can help students and help adults be not just better lifelong learners and better, more globally competent citizens, but frankly, better people of worth and value in this world. The focusing topic, as Dan mentioned, that we have for today is preparing students for international travel experiences and the cross-cultural learning opportunities. Oh, I think I got somebody in. I do think, and
I figured it out. I took you off.
Sorry
about that, Seth. I just want to let you know, I'm going to bring everybody in as a panelist whenever we're ready to have some Q&A, and we'll be able to see video and hear people.
Oh, it's much better. Thanks so much. As I was saying though, like this is the topic that, well, it allows some of the examples, it's the work that we do, but I also believe the precepts and all the things we're thinking about are true for designing of online courses in many different formats, as well as, well, teaching students in many different ways. So I'm hoping we'll see some applicability for a lot of different learning contexts. Now, one of the items I want to talk about is to bring up here is that there's actually a big debate going on in the global education and the experiential education world. And that debate comes down to the ideas of preparation versus discovery. And it goes down into a lot of ways of how do you want to allow students to experience the world, and how much time and how much effort do you want to spend and ask them to spend on preparing and doing research and fighting into it, as opposed to going out into the world with new and open eyes. A little bit of background on it, just to see that the case for discovery is really this idea that it's important to go out there, that staying inside the room, staying in little rooms like this and just communicating with folks over Skype, or just reading about different places, and can give you a lot of information, but it's not enough. And we live in this fantastic and beautiful world that, for those of us who are involved with experiential education, we know that matters, that it takes kids who might have the hardest time in traditional learning environments, and changes both their view of the world and their view of themselves, and their view of how they learn and how they actually enact with the world. The case that comes out, and I think most people agree that discovery is important, but there's an interesting debate and an interesting side coming out these days about making a case for discovery without preparation, with the idea that if you focus too much on structuring preparatory curriculum, structuring the in-country experience, you can inhibit the way that students learn. And there's a real threat here. The two cases that come out that are real on this are that there's a potential for changing the purity of the experience, that you've now told students this is how you're going to experience it. If you've prepared, you're going to see it in this way. And the second one is that you create a dynamic where there's an expectation that everything is solved, that everything is brought along. And that students become these passengers on the trip, not sort of the leaders or architects. And that's a real threat and a real problem. That really we want to bring up this idea, as Huxley said, that when we're sending students out into the world, it's to discover that everyone is wrong, that all these things that you've heard and people said in the preparation courses are not true for your own experience, and you need to provide the opportunity to, well, frankly, to have your own experience for that, and to have those deep-seated abilities to sit and think and experience on your own, as opposed to having looked at 15 YouTube videos and pulled the information from there. That's one side, and it's a real, there's real value and real, there's a real danger to it. It's a debate and a case that's made for based on reality of problems. The case for preparation, though, and the case for wanting to spend some time there comes about from a few areas. This quote I like mostly because of who it's from. It's for those of you who know Max Brooks, he's the author of World War Z. This is a quote from Preparing for the Zombie War. It has this idea that if you believe you really can just go out there, go to a new country, and get the depth of experience and really get into understanding and delving into another culture that fast, you're kidding yourself. And the time, if you look very interestingly, the time spent on international travel experiences, particularly at the school level, is decreasing over the last 5 years, certainly, but over the last 10, it's moved from something that's a 1 month, 2 month experience, frankly, a 1 semester experience, to 1 month, 2 month experience, now down to 2 to 3 weeks is about the average, so that the time is getting quite short. And if you think about understanding a culture, if you think about delving into it, you can begin to see that you're spending a lot of time here at the superficial level. I think for folks who are familiar with Edward Hall's iceberg model, it basically notes that anytime we think about culture, that there's a small amount that we actually get to see and a huge, huge amount that's invisible, that's below the surface. The stuff that we get to see that's under the visible is this behaviors and practices. This is the actual, the easiest one we think of are religious ceremonies, dances, but it's also sporting events, food, some religious ceremonies in terms of marriages, weddings, the outward expressions of culture that you see when you are a conscious observer. But what Hall notes, and what's quite true, is that these behaviors and practices are influenced and come out of people's interpretation of their own core values of the culture, that things that they've learned over time and are influenced by, and they decide how to interpret them, results in how they exude and show their culture to others. And what's quite interesting to note is that these elements about a particular country, a particular group of people's religion, their political background, the aspects of geography that create either isolation or mass contact with other groups, certainly elements in their particular history, as well as the makeup of the economic situation, affect and change how both what the core values are, but certainly they change how people and individuals and families and communities interpret their core values. So that as we learn about these things during a preparatory phase, during any time to go and explore a country, if we know more, if we have some glimmering, some inklings into the economics of a country and the particular history and modern history that affects how people live their lives today, we get to understand more about what we're seeing in the behaviors and practices, and we spend less time on that superficial level and are able to dig more deeply. Another reason why the preparation has been so important is that in this world right now, there's a lot of expectations placed on global education. I think anyone who's tasked with taking students abroad, who's tasked with working in this field of international ed in schools know that there's a huge pressure to make a global citizen, to build out the 21st century skills, to make global competency. And great expectations are just hard to fulfill. They're hard to get to. The folks over at World Savvy in Minnesota had a great survey a couple of years ago, where if you looked at Americans aged 18 to 24 and talked to them about their education, looking back at their high school education, only 52 would say that 52% said that education helped them to understand global issues that affect life today. That's barely more than half said, look, my education isn't helping me on a global scale. 37%, that means 63% said no, said that they had any understanding of different cultures, and only 26 to understand the global economy. On the side for preparation, it looks quite hard to say that, well, doing better at these and changing that dynamic means doing more, means spending some more time on the preparation side and spending more time in taking seriously the ill effects that can come about from simple discovery and simply letting students out into the world and hoping for the best. I want to take a second just here and see from any thoughts from the group, and perhaps this is also a nice spot, Dan, where we could have, it's a smaller group I know, so we have some short introductions just to know who's on the other side.
Sure thing. So all of you are about to get promoted. You're going to become panelists. It should be happening now. You will now be joining us. Hey, everybody. As though we were in some sort of virtual workshop environment. And now this should also allow you to have a little bit more control over your own audio and video. Perhaps some new icons popped up that allow you to mute or turn off your video camera as you see fit. But as of now, you are all on and participating. Kaylin, I can see that you're muted. I hope that's on purpose. Oh, now you're unmuted.
Are you on? Yeah, I am. I just have some construction. I'm working from home today, and I have some construction going on behind me, so I just want to be mindful of that.
That's a great announcement to make to the group as well. Everybody should be mindful of those funny conference call destroying noises. But we're all here, so back to you and more.
Yeah, I suppose it'd be really nice just to get a sense in a smaller group. Dan, if you have the attendee list and you can just run through to mark each person, it'd be great to get a very short introduction and to know, where you're coming from in this, as well as, for this topic and this idea of preparation and discovery. What I think there's a bit of a bias, obviously, about the nature of joining this group, but what sort of things you've done on both sides would be nice.
Sure. So just to facilitate some introductions, I'll go to the right on my little screen. Lori, you're the first one I see. If you want to just let us know sort of what's bringing you to this and your thoughts on the debate.
Hi, so I'm Lori Valantic, sorry, and I'm sitting with a colleague, and I'm just going to have her face. This is Nicole Seal, so we both work at Connecticut College, and we're interested in the preparation and discovery, and we're also interested in the reflection piece.
Yeah.
And we're about to, Nicole has been, she studied abroad when she was in college. I wasn't lucky enough to do that. But we're trying to figure out how to incorporate these pieces into and help students get the most out of it. So that's why we're here.
Hi. Kaylin, I see you're next on my screen if you want to say hello.
Hi. So I work for I was also at the symposium and presented on an online platform that I work for called CourseSolve, which is an online platform for digital internships. So we don't really, but we do facilitate a lot of internship opportunities with people from different countries. And I think a big thing that we're trying to figure out is giving students, I mean, I guess in terms of this preparation versus discovery piece, how much preparation and education they need before entering an internship opportunity with an employer potentially from a different country, versus how much should we leave to the employer and the student in that digital interaction. So this is just like helpful information for me to figure out, to think about the issue a little bit differently.
Totally. I'm sorry, Kaylin, what do you mean by a digital internship? Yeah.
So it's an internship that can be done virtually. So we actually have a marketplace of about 125 different employers. And on the other side of that are about 10,000 students who are taking various online courses and can use this as sort of a marketplace to find real world experience and practice what they're learning in the online classroom in an online environment. So employers post projects that they'd like students to work on, and students can engage with those employers and through those projects. And in exchange, that we've seen in some cases students get offers of employment, but mostly it's just a way to build their resumes without having to necessarily quit their day job or participate in an internship, a face-to-face internship, which often means full-time, unpaid kind of structure. So this is a way for students to sort of get real-world experience without, in a way that's a little bit more, I guess, low risk and lower commitment.
Yeah, I'm very curious about it. There's one thing that came up in some of our talks around this preparation and discovery side, that in a lot of ways, the world's changing to a way where discovery still means we're discovering the world and the way that we work by experiences like this of people in very different geographic locations, communicating only in a blended virtual manner where we're in real time and we're sort of with each other, but we're sort of not.
Right.
And one of the things I like to talk a bit about and get your opinions on is that the fact that these things are blending, that we're working with students to discover how to work virtually and interact with people, without needing to be in the same room as each other. It is a huge part of discovery for them. I mean, it sounds like, Kaylin, like your group is doing exactly that. I'm very curious.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the employers that we work with basically have told us that being self-directed today, and that is a competency of itself, and being able to work virtually and being self-motivated is a competency within itself. So we're trying to figure out how to structure these online projects in a way that at the end, if a student does a good job, they have this sort of certified, this badge, if you will, that certifies their ability to work in that manner, and could be really appealing and set them apart from some of their competition when looking for jobs.
Yeah, that's cool. Dan, are there other folks online, or is this it?
No, there's a few. Brent Bell is next in line to say hello. How's it going, Brent?
I'm doing well.
Oh, there you go. I didn't see your video at first. Yeah.
I have two screens, so I'm giving you the profile view. So I think really, this is my best side. But I'm at the University of New Hampshire,
Cool.
and I was at for the first day of the symposium on the digital age, and I was unable to be there for the second day, and so I'm glad to have this opportunity to see this, and I'm also kind of interested in the technology here of this virtual meeting thing. I guess my comments on the preparation and discovery sound to me a lot like I think that what we talk about with whether to sort of when we're reflecting on experience, do we sort of ask questions after the experience and do sort of this post-trip, post-experience reflection, or do we front load it with things and give sort of students the sort of schema to work within? And to me, it sounds like a very similar choice, and I think they're both valuable. I really love the idea of discovery and kind of seeing where things go at times, and that's kind of probably my style. But I think as we get more, I'm sad sometimes that we do more and more preparation because we want people to get to a certain goal sometimes, and which takes away some of the creativity. And I think that's your point, right? There's some maybe I don't know. I'm a big believer in serendipity when I'm traveling or adventuring, and I love those serendipitous moments. And so I hate to lose those, but I also see how if you have a goal and you want people to get to a goal, the preparation can help them get there. So those are my 2 cents, I guess, on that.
No, I agree. One of the things we found, and it works, that just leaving off preparation means that the students who are naturally going to do well still do well. But there's some students who need different ways for pushes and need some entry points and reasons to want to engage. And some of the projects with Onboard, projects with students that would not normally be the folks going out and doing international travel. We're doing one of my favorites coming up this summer is the Hingham High School here in Hingham, Mass baseball team is traveling out to Japan to play against a Japanese school, and they're taking a variety of courses and engaging in Japan in a variety of ways. And it's a group of kids that wouldn't see themselves as international travelers or interested in the Far East in any way. And because of that, there needs to be some ideas of structure for them to find ways to engage and be interested and dig into Japan as opposed to just going and making sure that they played baseball okay and coming back. But that's about maximizing. I think we got a couple more folks to say hi to, I know.
Yeah, Molly, I see you there. Why don't you say hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm Molly Monet Vieira, and I teach at Boston University, and I teach Spanish. So I teach a lot of people who go abroad. There are students who I'm encouraging to go abroad. There are students who come back from abroad. I myself have been a student abroad and a teacher for students who were studying abroad. But BU has a program in Madrid and many other places as well, but that's the one I know. And I think, going back to what Brent said, can you ever take away serendipity? I mean, just because you prepare someone doesn't mean that you're going to prepare them for every possible eventuality. I mean, I think to think about it, if you think about hopefully cultivating a mindset, an open mindset, they're always going to have the ability to have wonder and experience, have new experiences. And I think we should set them up to do so. But I also think that we should give them some basic cultural information. Like, for example, as a language teacher, I give them things like when you need to use the formal register and when it's okay to use the informal register, or just certain expectations of if you're living with a family, in a family stay, what kinds of cultural traditions, what kind of family dynamics are you going to experience? So I think those are all really important things to at least discuss. Not every family is the same in every culture, obviously, but I think it's important to give them some preparation. And also, too, as someone brought up, people have different learning styles, and some people need preparation, and to be kind of dropped off with very little, I think, would be quite challenging for them.
No, totally. I'll get this when we talk about curating content for it, but I think another aspect is the fact that we live in a world where anyone who's going out is going to look for their own preparation if they're not. And one of the value addeds of any teacher or any facilitator in this aspect is finding both either the right content or setting the right questions and tasks to access that content. And that's a huge part. There's a reason why I have it as one of the topics here. Cool. Well, thanks, Molly. Dan, are we?
Last but certainly not least, Nicole, I believe you're sitting right next to Lori, but we'll let you speak for yourself if you want to say hello.
I am. So if you can hear me, Lori's got the sound and I've got the video. So
It's working just fine.
And I think Lori said before, but we are working with integrating experiential education into our core curriculum at the college. So that's something we're wondering about. And certain differences, I'm personally curious about potential differences between preparation for intellectual development and preparation for personal development. Where do they come together? Where do they stay separate? How much of each is appropriate for students and things like that?
Yeah, totally.
Can you hear me?
It's a huge one around thinking, and part of the content is that idea of objectives and objectives and topics, I guess. And it depends a lot on to be honest, some on the age of the students, and if you do a lot of look around where adolescent development is, we do a lot of work on risk management stuff for kids, because if you look at the idea of adolescent brain development, then if you spend time with teenagers, or if you're old enough like I am to reflect on how lucky I was to not be dead, you know that the things that's a part of some training that's needed. And so to look at when people are set for different times is quite big.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think I'll keep going. I know, Dan, you're big on time, and I've got a lot of things that I want to introduce and run through a little bit, and I'll bring it up. But again, now that we've got everyone on the line, I'm quite comfortable being interrupted. Or if you hit the little QA, I think I'll get a hand up on from you. And we'll have periodic breaks at the end of each one just to check in and see for comments and reactions about the work we've done and the way that we're looking at this. And yeah, don't hesitate at any time to speak critically, speak admiringly, or just quite fine. Great. I want to talk a little bit about pedagogical considerations, and there's a variety of people's names to talk about here for looking at different structures for online learning and how to set up and do this. The way that we really look at is thinking about the different interactions that take place and thinking of 4 domains, and recognizing that unless you're spending time thinking about and answering questions in each of these domains, that student motivation will drop off. That you're really asking students to be superheroes in a lot of ways, that you're asking them to be very independent, very go-getter learners, that unless you as the overall designer is working on this, it's hard to ask everyone to do. And so we look very carefully at each of these. And the domains, in case it's small on your screens, are thinking about how do you interact with the content, how do you interact with the actual learning objects, how do you interact with your peers, the other folks, your co-learners, so who is learning with you out there in the world. How are you interacting with the facilitator? Who is this person who's in the aspect of Dan in this case? What role is he playing, and how do you fit in with him, and how present is that person? And then finally, that you have to spend a lot of time thinking about how the students and how people are going to interact with the technology itself. That I mentioned this in the very start, that one of the earliest answers that we have to look at is the technology worth learning how to use? Because that's something you develop a mastery in from taking an online course, from engaging in, and making sure that it's a useful technology in that sense. The different questions, different things we look at on this are, that are worth answering. Are we providing the actual learning content? Are we giving students the lists of do's and don'ts? Are we giving them the actual videos on a destination, the historical timelines? Or are we asking them to set tasks to go out and find their own content and bring it back to the group? And this is one of those first early key questions to decide on, because we do live in a world where there's a wealth of resources out there. and we're making a choice in some ways to limit if we're deciding that we're going to find it all. But it can be a valuable choice as well, and there's reasons for each side. And then thinking again, as always, how will students prove their understanding? And the best side of this is creating something that they're actually showing that they can put out a product that demonstrates that they have grappled with, have dug into, and can do something with it. And then considering to some extent, and it differs for each course. I'm going to go through some of the examples as we go on for the work we've done and see. For some, it's great to give them time for extension, deviation. It's very easy to pull off on this sidetrack. For others, I can think, Molly, as a Spanish teacher, you probably agree. Sometimes you need kids to know something. You need them to get through that amount of space and how you want to set up. And to know if your course and what you're setting up is one where you want there to be a lot of free flow for extension and deviations, or you want it to be, yes, you've got through this content, you've got it down, I know that they know this, now we can move on. Those are interesting questions and the key early ones to get into. Cool. The interactions with peers, I'm going to talk about this a lot under enabling interactions. The two biggest things are, what are the reasons for interactions like this? If there's a reason, the technology side will come about. But there has to be some reason for people to want to talk to each other, to have a real need to do it. And it can't be just, you must talk to each other. There has to be a greater objective in that. And we'll go through some of those, but some of the incentives that work for students, and I'd be glad to hear from your own experiences, what you've seen. In terms of the interaction with the facilitator, when you're facilitating both work like this, as Dan's able to doing, as well as designed to facilitate an online course forum, or to be the sort of hidden instructor who just responds magically to whenever students submit assignments. There's lots of different ways depending on how you structure your course. But what are the behaviors that you want students to have, that you want people to do, in terms of promptness of responding, how quickly you want to get information back, to comment on every item, every posting that a student does, how much space to bring new students in. And very importantly, both that you're showing these behaviors as the facilitator, and then as rapidly as possible, distributing leadership amongst the group to step in and take control, to allow students, to allow anyone to be the facilitator, to take on those behaviors, so that frankly, a goal of most online courses is that they can exist with the instructor taking a very, very minimal role, and sort of stepping in only when everyone's randomly on mute in the initial webinar. Hopefully by the third time that we go through and keep up a conversation like this, well, I finally have figured out how to unmute everyone, but other folks can step in and take on those tasks. The final one is around technology. And I just don't know, like, there's a reason I put technology last, because we often put it first. We think, okay, I want to do an online class. Well, what's my platform? Okay, how am I doing the webinar? Am I using Zoom? What's the best platform for this? Am I using Blackboard, Collaborate? But you've got to go through the other domains first to think, all right, what do I want people to do? And then what are the tasks for which the technology is actually needed? And then you can begin to make the design choices around what platforms are best suited for these tasks. Why is it worthwhile for students to learn to use these? It's one of our big findings and our big points that I'll, at the risk of being over, I have to say, like, we want kids to learn stuff that they can put on, very frankly, on their resume of, yeah, I took this online course, now I know how to use this platform. I'm an expert in it that's of use in the professional side world, in the greater world. So we want to be very thoughtful about that. And also on the other side, to note that if we work in the technology space, it's a vibrant, it's growing, it's changing space, that better alternatives are going to be found. That the replacement to Zoom is coming up next week, next year. And how easily you're able to change platforms, and how you're able to feel about that when someone says, yeah, look, this just doesn't work for me. How can I bring up a new one? Those are the kinds of, these are the main questions and the main things that we found are very important to dig into when setting up the course. this is one of my moments here to take a pause, and I guess I'm curious to hear from you guys about your comments in your space around setting these up, and if they sound like in your own work with students, if which of these domains has been the hardest for you or not. Yeah.
The technology.
You say.
Do you? So we can respond together.
We can respond together.
Cool. I will.
We can hear you responding together.
Oh, can you? Sorry. So we're kind of like, oh, you got to the technology part and we just went, oh, we have these platforms that are so clunky, but people have put so much time and effort into them. They want to keep using them. And we're like, we don't want to. This doesn't work for the students. It's not even mobile. What are we doing? So that's where we are.
Yeah, I agree. Technology is frustrating.
It was just so striking to hear you say, is the technology worth learning how to use? And I think we grapple with that every day. It's so complicated to learn to use it. And at the end of the day, it's not one of those useful technologies that the student can then bring out as a skill they have into the outside world or put on their resume. So yeah, I mean, even maybe we could get some feedback as to how others have interpersonal side of technology when people feel so personally invested, and how you deal with that, how you navigate that with your colleagues.
I mean, I'm lucky that in our organization we get to, but we've gone through, and I'll talk about different LMSs and when they work and when they don't. I'm curious that we've got Boston University, New Hampshire. Is there a set learning management system that you're forced to use or not?
Yeah, UNH we use Blackboard.
We do too.
Yeah, and it's
Forced to use it.
was that where?
You're not forced to use it. At least
Well,
not for you.
Well, I try to avoid it as much as I can. I'm not a big fan of it, but it has some useful features. But I think I think one of the issues is that there is probably first and foremost, Blackboard helps only allow students who are registered and enrolled in courses see the material. And I think that it does that really well, to the point where I really have trouble inviting or getting anyone to work with the content if you're not registered. And so I think that's part of I think the value of that is to try to the content, but I find it pretty restrictive when things like, because I'd like students to, I don't know, maybe talk to someone outside the class, or have these other relationships. And then it's just really clunky. I know about other places, I think it varies by campus, but I have to go through 5 screens to be able to do something. And I find passwords are really great about protecting my content from myself. So I just find that most of it is like, I don't think people really want to steal much from me, but boy, I can't get in oftentimes. So it's a bit of a frustration. So I try to use more, I don't know, just email and Google Drive actually a lot with students. I find it much easier. I'd say that just voted on a new content system. I think we're going to get next year. So, and I forget the name of it, but basically there's an evaluation of like moving to it. So I think Blackboard is, sort of universally frustrating here for most of the faculty.
There's good things and bad things to say about all. For Blackboard, I know very honestly, because when the work we've done a lot with high school students, they turn off from it right away.
Why?
There's a design aesthetic that folks are used to, and if you look at things like Facebook or Gmail, there's a lot of work that goes into the design of them that people are used to for the utility. And when those drop away for something that has an older, more feature-heavy design, it doesn't look like something you want to use, and it doesn't work that way. And there's a big reason why we never see the upkeep in them. There's some other LMSs that I'll mention, some of the options that I go through that spend a little more time on design, but there's also some problems with any learning management system. Cool. Thanks. I'm gonna to push on a little bit to the next one. I'm curious. I'm not surprised to hear that technology and the decisions are the toughest one. I empathize with it. I think one of the biggest problems is that it's the one where you don't get to make the decisions about. And I put it here as last because I said, look, you need to think about all these other things first and then decide the right technology. In most of our organizations, a lot of times you're given the technology and then you have to figure out how you're going to do everything else inside. But with that in mind, I wanted to go to the next side, which is on that interaction with content, because otherwise, if you're not thinking about it, you're just having some really nice Skype talks and some really nice Zoom talks and some really nice times to get to know each other. But you have to think a little bit about what is the kind of content you want to provide for students, what is the kind of content you want to put out there, but also what is the kinds of activities and interactions you want students to have with it. One of the ways that's important for myself personally and our organization to think about this, for folks who like the teaching for understanding methodology, which I'm a big proponent of, is look, folks are going to learn things that they get a chance to learn and they have a reason to learn. And when we're thinking about curating content, when we're thinking about putting it out there, it's really thinking about giving them that opportunity of giving them a reasonable chance to engage with material that's of quality and has a distinct learning possibility inherent within it, that by watching this you'll know more things. I'll give a little my age. You don't ask students to watch Beavis and Butthead. You ask them to watch a better documentary, and to really look at what are things that are worth learning about. Things are different. Things change quite rapidly for this, and it's good to remember this in the side of how rapidly the amount of data and the amount of information out is there. I pulled this from Netcraft LiveStats. It's a very interesting site. Just yesterday, they've probably gone up now. This is the amount of these things happening every second around the world. And so we're looking at a much more massive flow of information than ever before. That it took until 2004 or 5 for 1 billion people to have internet access. 2010 for 2 billion, 2014 for 3 billion, and we're getting closer and expanding faster, and that allows a lot more interactions and a lot more stuff. And it's not just the number of people accessing, but the amount of things that they're doing online is increasing all the time. This is, the number of websites worldwide. In the billions. And one of the things I wanted to note, to put a little mark on 2004, that's when Wikipedia was first launched as this sort of go-to site. When you think about that as a curating site of information, that was a long time ago that was said as, okay, here's where you can go. There's a lot of other sources, there's a lot of other places and possibilities for students, for adults, for anyone to go after and try and find information that's both great. It gives you this hope that you have this wide set of the ability to access and talk to both experts and people who are very close to actual experiences and content, and sort of flatten the world in that way. The truth is that if you talk to most students at the high school age, the kids we work with, if you ask them to do research, they go to Wikipedia. If you ask them to really push for research, they'll put in a Google search and look at the top 3 things, and they'll peek around on YouTube if there's a video, without a huge amount of saying, well, here's the particular value of this video versus the other. And it creates a reason, and going back to this idea of content curation, for you to exist, for the teacher to add value in that way. That said, I did want to bring up the stat that I wanted to pull it out here to note. I had a doctor's appointment yesterday, and I was thinking about this, that US physicians look at Wikipedia for information on conditions.
I had a doctor do that while I was in his office. I was like, why am I here then?
But I bring this up in the sense, and I think in the academic sense, we always have this vague trouble with knowing how much weight to give to Wikipedia or other online sources, because there's this holiness around printed text or holiness around something else, and that's shifting. There has to be an evaluation of each piece of material, but there is value in Wikipedia articles. There's value in anything found online, as long as it's carefully evaluated, and both doing that ourselves as instructors and content developers, or teaching students and working through the process with them of finding that can be quite powerful. In the process of going about curating the content to building a course, there's a point that has to come up with setting objectives and choosing topics. I chose this graphic because I think for most folks who really enjoy teaching, setting objectives is not the most fun thing to do. To say, what is your learning objective for every course feels a bit false sometimes. And very honestly, good curriculum, good lessons don't start with, well, what do I want kids to learn? But they end up with them at the end. That when you start thinking first about how do I want students to engage, what do I want to do with them, you'll start with a particular thing that you want them to engage with. I mentioned the baseball trip we're taking to Hingham. This started from a wonderful PBS documentary, Kokayaku, that the students at the baseball teacher at the school at Hingham watched a few years ago and became inspired by, and then built up the objective of let's understand baseball and sports in general from another cultural viewpoint, and how it relates to both the connection between cultures and exemplifies a difference between the two. And that just started from a really cool 80-minute video. Another one that it could also start, particularly in international travel, from a particular connection. We do a lot of work with Peru with the Grassroots Business Fund, but it started with just a connection to that organization. And when you have those beginning connections, that beginning really weighty material, you can then step back and start to think, okay, what does this fit into? What is this sort of bucket of type of topic it fits into? And from that, what kind of real objective do I want to pull out of it? And what kind of subtopics do I want to dig in? The one I want to note for us at Envoy is a lot of the time that we do this work, we think about buckets of, okay, when we're pulling this, where does this fit? And it's courses or other ones. Of, yeah, this is cool, throw it here. This is cool, throw it here. There's the travel well bucket is always a lot, as I mentioned, with teenagers around risk management of knowing where they are. A bit of it is also helping them to be more empathic travelers and to move from being tourist to traveler, to understanding better that world. The history and modern culture bucket has to do with any destination you're going to. We have a big thing up on our wall. You must know the we believes, and one of the we believes is you need to know the capital of a country to go there. And then the social impact is, it's a nice one to have a bucket to know. I think that question of if you want to get at the non-academic objectives, or sort of the prep for intellectual pursuits or personal pursuits, do you want to set a bucket for developing either a topic or a theme, or developing as a person, and to put content into that? As we look at these, then we start to pull out these different ways of saying what are the particular to the destination that we want them to know. What is the subtopic that is interesting about this? It's really important for us, as I mentioned with high school students, that you pull out something that has an intrinsic interest to it. And I hate to say it, but violence always has one degree of intrinsic interest. And also, and one of the things, particularly when working with folks from other cultures and other places, is to ask what's important to you about your own history. What are the parts of it that are meaningful for you and your understanding to bring out? And then we build out a variety of different content here to begin to allow students to review information and answer some basic questions around this. This is from one, we'll get into the enabling access, one of the more, where we have a lot more design control sites. and then asking them on the flip side of it to take responsibility for their knowledge, to build out to choose their own subtopic that they'd like to conduct research on, and then we give them the opportunity to either make a briefing sheet, to make a one-page sheet of information with some graphic design, to invent a new meme to go out for related to this topic, or to make an infographic, to allow some limited choice that allows both the ability to get to build a new skill, to make an infographic, to have some creativity of design, as well as to become a pseudo beginning expert on something to share with their larger class. And those are powerful ways to begin to fool around in that bucket. On the travel well, one of the big things I mentioned was the risk context associated with the program. We do a lot of work here on disease pathways. It's an easy and understandable bucket for kids to start to know, and it begins, one of the real objectives for it is for students to begin to understand why and how you can travel anywhere safely in the world. That when you take students to Malawi, they start off by going, oh my God, Malawi. Say, well, if you go to the doctor and go through the health information, you get the necessary shots and understand what you need to do in the country and how it's a different disease burden and a different risk context, you can be fine and safe there, and to build that confidence. And so we go through and curate a variety of different content on it for them to understand what the different ways that people can get sick and can get diseases, and have the little quick checks on them to make sure they're moving through, and have a few discussions and on online forums about that. The social impact, we looked at diversity of ways for social impact, the Grassroots Business Fund, to cover that as sort of the subtopic. And we looked at this in a couple ways. One is the bigger picture of international aid. So where is international aid now? How did it evolve over time? And this is the content to curate that we want students to pick up some pieces, to know some basic facts about. In the 1960s, people thought this way. In the 70s, this was the prevailing item coming out. And then we didn't use Zoom for this one, but just have a variety of group Skype calls to have conversations and debates around, does this still work, does this not, and to delve into that. In terms of sourcing this content, in terms of where you're going to pull it from, where you're going to find and look at it, because I mentioned it's this wild and beautiful world of thousands of things being created and out there all the time. Looking for text, there's a lot of different ways. Those of you at academic institutions, I'm sure your school has some guidelines on it. We have those for our different folks who work with that at Envoys for how to do it. The biggest thing I tell people, and the biggest thing we look for, is be proud of your citations. Be proud if someone asks, where did this come from? What are you giving to your students? It's something you can say is great. To seek primary sources as much as possible, the real, the scanned, very old newspaper article, the actual photo, the real live video, but then also to prioritize research universities, educational channels, and PBS Discovery Channel have great content on there, to look for those as places that you can feel very comfortable with the content from. For images, the same idea of being sure of your citations, being sure that it's a thing that you're within the Fair Use Act to use. Use public libraries are a huge, great source. The New York Public Library has an immense array of historical images online. There's some great public domain sites. Pixabay allows you to get a lot for free. Creative Commons licensing from Flickr. But then also to put out and budget a small amount for going for a paid image site, because there's some people taking great photos that can really fit and really convey exactly what we'd like, and to be able to pay them a small amount to have in your course is certainly worthwhile. For videos, there's a very, very similar thing, except to make sure that everything is screened very carefully for quality and content, and to separate what are sort of the fancy design videos. There's a lot of these short 2-minute promo spots from the actual content heavy education ones, are some of the big rules we look at here. The other items actually I want to touch on briefly is that there's a rule that we have in the group folks who are doing and searching for new content is you got to find something else. That we live in a world where the web has a lot of interesting ways of interacting and finding out different games and finding out cool stuff. and you have to go find them. The websites like Gapminder, it's a bit old now, it's developed quite a bit, but ways that students can play with data and dig into is fantastic, and gives you this amazing ability to manipulate different variables over time and see how they change compared to different countries. There's a great site called Games for Change. I pulled a couple from this where you can pull out different ethics tests, different web-based games. I don't know if you played, we use this with middle school kids. The AEE Cost of Life is a really interesting game to play around with. I didn't want this workshop to devolve into Seth's list of 50 great sites for teachers. I'll send it along to Dan, or I'm happy to send out to you guys. I wanted to bring up and give a couple of these examples as sort of this little note that our rule is to find the coolest things you can related to any of those buckets, keep looking for more, and also to set tasks for students to go find more cool things out there, and to engage in the work in that way. How are we doing? This is one of my check-in spots.
Good.
I'll push on. I know my time got away a little bit from me.
Yeah, the time is not a problem for me, Seth. It's just people's schedules. You're welcome to continue going as long as you want to.
Okay, well, I'll keep going a bit. The parts here are quite interesting, and enabling access is really comes down to this problem you were talking about, Brent, from the start of, well, what do I have to do, and what do I want to do as ways of getting more people involved? That your buckets get messy, you get a big full thing of content with a lot of stuff in it, and you need to find a way as a teacher to have a big added value to this, that you've organized the information, the activities, and you've given the students a way to engage with it. There's a few different groupings that are worth thinking about, and I just wanted to bring some of them up to give you some of the options and talk about how we've looked at different ones. But very honestly, one of the ways that, depending on the group, depending on what's thought of, is just to write out, send them an email, I call it a paper syllabus, but to send them an email or anything with, here's what it is, here's where you can find it, and here's what you want the kids to do with it, and then move on. And there's a good amount of value from that. That if it's most important that they just see this site, they just watch this particular video, and that they've seen it, then looking at that as one of the choices is probably one to think a lot about. The other side, though, is to move on, and what most schools and larger sites push folks towards are different commercial LMSs. And there's a lot out there. There's larger ones in this, Skillsoft, and there's folks on the business side. Blackboard and Moodle are probably the two largest on the university campus. Edmodo, Schoology, and Canvas are doing a lot of work in the secondary school world, and doing a lot there. And there's another new one that pops up every day. I'll show you a little bit that we've done with Schoology. And I think you'll find this is from the student side. There's an easily understandable organizational structure. That's true for for Blackboard and for most LMSs. And you begin to see this set of learning pathways that's quite clear of, here's your units, here's how you interact, and how you can push and go through that. It's also, they can be really valuable because they give you these ready-made solutions for, if I want a discussion forum, if I want a test, how are kids going to submit assignments? Those things are handled quite well within it. That's what LMS is built for. And it eases the administrative burden of conducting courses. And it's a lot easier to be at scale when you're using things in an LMS. And ultimately, how systematic you want your course to be, how much you want it to feel like a set learning pathway in that way, it will guide that decision. But the bigger one, I think, is what are students already using? And I hate to say it for the fixed pathway set, but if students at University of New Hampshire are comfortable with Blackboard, you're probably going to have to let them continue using Blackboard rather than asking them to take on a new site. But you can also look at intermixing between, and this is one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on, is seeing where's an LMS, how can we use the great things that they give you of the ready-made solutions, along with wanting to present content in a new and more interactive way, as well as using social groups and ways to as you mentioned, Brett, to let more people engage and let more people be a part of this. On the side of self-made sites, there's a lot of options, obviously, for building things yourself, and depends on your own particular competency and level. Wix is probably the easiest. Adobe Muse is a very nice one if you have a design bent. WordPress folks love a lot, and these are all quite easy and easy to dig into, depending on where you feel you are. That there's obviously quite a lot more. What it allows you to do when you build sites and when you start to build information on this side is you can set up the content to be something very visually attractive, to be something that and to make videos and other things that can get people engaged just on their own of, wow, what a beautiful thing you've created. It allows you to mix graphical elements in a different way. There's a wide array of embeddable timelines, infographic sites, videos, etc., to build these things into each site and put them in. And it allows you to pull from different places around the web and put it into one place whereby students can know, look, I can click on just one place and see all the content and all the things that are really interesting, everything in that bucket organized in a visually attractive and compelling way. And you can then lay out what we call the independent pathway journey is quite good for this, where students, and it really, it maximizes the advantage of online courses, which is that you can take them anytime you want in some ways. You don't need to wait for the synchronous discussion of everyone's, okay, let's finally be at the same time, but you can choose when you want to look at the mapping assignment and do your work. And lay out an independent pathway for people to do everything in a week, to spread it out over 4 weeks, but to jump in at different times and different segments and catch up rapidly, or stay behind and fall behind and then catch up again, in different entryways to engaging with the work. And again, as I mentioned, it's possible to use a wide variety of embeddable widgets for assignments, forums, things like that. The whole Google Docs suite it can be quite nice with these. ProProfs is one that we've used a bit. Very honestly, people use SurveyMonkey, a lot of other form building things to build this out. Or you can integrate with the commercial LMS to say, click here to go to Blackboard and make that move. And that's often a valuable way to start to thinking about the best of what are the tasks I want to do for the technology, as opposed to saying I must do everything in one versus another. The big questions around this are, look, ultimately, how self-paced do you want your course to be? How comfortable are you with people coming in late, with falling behind and catching up? And how important is design control of the content for you? How important is it that you feel like you built something and curated and put it all out to be quite beautiful, and to have it stand on its own to be engaging for kids in that way? Another element, another line, and again, these aren't discrete choices, but the ones that you can look at for based on what task you're looking at, how do you want to do access, are to fall into any of the social media aspects of Facebook groups, Google communities, and others. These, of course, have the power of allowing for regular updates, of creating a closed group and inviting whoever you want to engage in it. They allow for independent discussions and people just to post things and continue going, and general file sharing of updates. It always has the advantage of there being an easy uptake for people, that students and people anywhere are already on, and it's a quick upload for them to join this group and begin to work on it. With the Google communities, you'll get a slightly more complex feature set, but it generally, and possibly to integrate with Google, but generally gives you the same benefits of being able to share information and being able to let students themselves share information. And the value of that is how much new content you expect to come up during the course, how much sort of learner found content, because the priority of it is to be able to share things quite easily. If you expect that to come up during the course of building it, you need to be creating the Facebook group, the other group, for people to be able to share it, because very honestly, they've done a better job than Blackboard or anyone else will in sharing web-based content. But also, how important is public discussion for you? How important is it that people in the group see what other people are saying? Because that's where, obviously, another one of their great strengths are.
Can I ask a question about that?
Totally. Yeah.
I'm wondering if Facebook is still like a vital, social media for kids
Totally.
of a certain age.
It's a very interesting one, and it's one that we watch and look at, and I'll talk about the enabling interactions to see. What's interesting about it is that although the use goes down in terms of daily use and the amount of time and use spent on Facebook, the having of a Facebook account stays high.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a basic, yes, of course I have this. And it's an easy way. A lot of students that we work with will note that a lot of this, it's interesting with the cross-cultural work, is it's an easy Rolodex for people to know of, oh, I'll find you on Facebook, I'll be able to connect with you and to make that connection. Although once that connection's made, there are, and we'll go into this in interactions, there's a wide variety of different ways that people can have those conversations and have it. And again, that's one thing I mentioned, like for the social groups, is it important for people to have a discussion that you see? Because that's where Facebook is great, is everyone can see what everyone else is doing. If you don't care and if you don't want to, then you don't need that. And you can allow for the sort of belief that they're having conversations that you as a teacher can be outside of. And that's,
I like a public discussion forum personally.
Yeah. There's a lot of value to it, and it depends a lot on the size of the course and what people are going to get into. I threw this one at the end to note that, I think a lot of times when we're looking at the technology choices, it's that feeling of, let me choose one. I've got to do just Blackboard. I've got to build all my own sites. I've got to do just a Facebook group. But it's really important to start to think of the different benefits and costs for each one and how you might mix them together for a particular group of students and for a particular objective. Cool. Final one, which is the one I like talking about the most in some ways, is this idea of enabling interactions. And it's one of the trickier ones because it's, that we can provide all this great content, we can set up the stage for people, but you don't know if they're going to go dance, despite how great the music you have. And one of the ways to think about it is, if I ask you which one's more difficult, to actually just go build a shopping mall, to set up the construction for it, or to make sure it's filled with people who are going shopping. These are both challenges. And I told Dan we wouldn't have any polls on this, but most folks, we've done this and others say, no, filling it with shopping seems more difficult, is a trickier task to take on. And this comes down to what are called technical and adaptive challenges. And this is very much from who does some amazing work in seeing the challenges in education. Technical challenges are those well-defined problems that, yes, I need to do A or B, where adaptive, you're not quite sure what you're trying to solve, what you're trying to do. For a technical challenge, you just need time and money. If we want to build a shopping mall, it's known how to do it. You just know that you need to have however much time and however much money. An adaptive challenge, filling that shopping mall with people, requires changing a process or finding a process to bring stores in, to set up promotions, to make sure pricing's right, to make sure timing's right, and changing the process by which you work. And that there's a different set of responsibility for solutions, for getting these, that the responsibility of a technical challenge is with a leader, an expert, and there's a feeling that it's known, the solution's known out there in the world. The adaptive challenge is, very honestly, you're asking people to do something differently, so the responsibility comes distributed in that sense. And the reason to bring this up, particularly for this, is, look, technical challenges are always being solved. That as soon as we find a problem that requires a new form of technology, if the need is there, the need will be filled. However, on the educational side, adaptive challenges are constantly being created. I bring up the Partnership for 21st Century Skills in this project around it, that it throws things. The Common Core state standards are throwing things again if you work in the secondary school world of, you have to change the way you work. The bar is shifted. And that's something that's both quite fun. It keeps pushing you, but it creates new challenges for you to work. And you can think of this very much on the interaction side of online courses, is creating means for people far apart to communicate is a technical challenge that can be solved through and is being solved in new and different ways. But creating reasons for students to actually need to talk to each other is a challenge that requires both the creating the context for it, but also asking the students themselves to get into it. And it requires a change for the students to change their lives. And so that's a harder problem in some ways.
Cool distinction.
The principle I want to turn back to again is, why do people learn? And it comes back to this idea of reasonable motivation to learn. So what we want to think about for enabling interactions is, how are we hitting their motivation? How are we giving students ways to learn, reasons, and to want to be part of a social group and interact and write things. From all of our work, we can see there's sort of two reasons why students engage, that they have some entry reason, there's something that pulls them in, and then there's something about the context itself that allows them to sustain and keep being a part of it. The entry reasons we found generally fall into two sides. One is the opportunity for recognition and highly structured tasks that give them a way of saying, yes, I've done it. I know what I have to do. It requires this many interactions, this many forum posts, and okay, I've done it. And it gives them that feeling of, I don't need to, it eases the cognitive burden of the adaptive challenge that the process is known, so that it's not as difficult to start. The recognition opportunities, most folks know this for extrinsic motivation, but certificates are great. Credit is great. Awards are great. Those competencies that were mentioned, if you know that you're going to get a particular type of credit that's worth it in your world, that's huge for kids. The other one that we found with a lot of students, particularly for our work, is the unique differentiation side of recognition. The ability to tell people, I'm working with a group in Sri Lanka, I'm doing a cool course with them, I'm doing preparation for my trip to Peru, is a huge bragging rights thing for teenagers and frankly for adults. The other side is establishing new relationships, and to be able to get kids in the door with that, to be able to say, you're able to make friends. There was a very interesting group, the 2020 challenge set out by the National Association of Independent Schools, which partnered different independent schools with groups in different countries. And we did focus groups evaluating students who participated in this. And far and away, the best thing they found from each of this was, I got a new friend in a new country. And that's the reason to say, look, my network is bigger. And that's a huge entry step to be able to draw people in to this kind of work, if you get to make that connection. The final recognition opportunity, the idea of how do you draw people in, is that you get to develop a new skill, you get to engage in this particular way. The structured tasks that you can look at, these are just a few of the many, and again, I'm happy to send a lot of our lists of stuff out. Icebreakers from people across different geographic spaces, asking them to describe what's out their window, to talk about in that way, to describe how they get to school, describe their daily meals, take out and share different games we play. These are the ways to get people both to start to think about themselves and start to understand the difference of, well, what's all around us on that other side, that it's very easy to see the different videos that pop up here and think, well, looks like Brent has a slightly nicer office than Lori, but I'm not really sure. He certainly has a nicer office than me, but
I don't know.
But to start to look around and to understand those things in environment, break the ice and get people into each other. We then start to push into what I call second stage icebreakers, which are getting into not just your immediate surroundings, but more about the people as a whole and where they are. So you dig into family histories, myths and legends for comparativeness are amazing things to look at, to say what's a common myth, what's a common legend in your culture, in your family, in your community, and to explain that. Common superstitions, rules of conduct are great. I think you, Molly mentioned this as well. Like what do you do on a first date? What do you do when you're sitting down to a formal dinner, to an informal dinner? And those are great fun ways to get people to start to teach each other about different things, and then to begin to engage in trivia content. They're a nice second stage icebreaker. And I'd like to note, these are still structured tasks. They're structured setup things that we're using as a way to get people used to interacting across the tricky medium for them. So it decreases the burden of, oh my God, I have to set up the technology. They know what to do once they've set it up, and they know what to go into. And so that's no longer so hard. We do a lot of stuff from group discussions on gender, rules of conduct, and others as well. That brings people in and gets them together. One of the things that we found is truly important is next what we call the sustaining context. That it's great to get everyone first in, and they've had enough of the structured tasks to say, and doing something cool to say, okay, I'll start with this. But what's really powerful is that there's a project that people can engage in across the culture or within a disparate team that allows them to keep working together. And that is a project that has certain elements in next particular intrinsic goals within particular students. The one I want to use as an example is a very cool one we're working on now, the mobile ed classroom, whereby different groups of teams, some are all at one school, some are teams where it's one or two kids from each school who are sort of collaborating with one or two from another school. It's usually teams of 4 to 8, are looking at what they would design to put in a shipping container to improve education in different places around the world. And we have some different groups set up. We work with a group called Techo down in 17 countries in Latin America to look at what can be done with them, as well as another group in Sri Lanka, Educate Lanka. It's been very interesting to begin pushing this project on. And we do a wide variety of things on the online side, both for students to dig into who they are themselves, to set up some questions.
Myers-Briggs?
Yeah, it's a nice, easy one.
But no, I was actually thinking about that when you were talking about lack of preparation. Some people, I think it's the P's love no preparation, and J's absolutely need it.
Yeah, that's true. You're probably right. I'm thinking about my own score and what it means for where I go.
No, if you sent a J somewhere without any preparation whatsoever, they would not like it.
Not at all.
But it's good for them.
Yeah, well, I agree, but you know,
And
the P's need some structure, but
to the fact that you can be a researcher and set up things just to see if it's good for them. Yeah. It's always and the project side, some of the intrinsic things about this that are cool from this kind of work is it enacts a wide variety of skills. And that's the part of the context that we've seen is keeping people engaged in doing it. That you're a part of a team, you get to manage it. There's a language exchange part because they're talking with people in different regions of the world. They're conducting needs assessments to ask for a community, what do you need for in a shipping container? What are the educational needs, and designing that. There's graphic design, the software skills and architectural drawing of designing these things. They're building scale models. It's on an 8-foot, 4-foot of it. And then finally having to present in a competition side and put out a detailed cost analysis. It means that in the course of doing this, you have to learn how to do a lot of different things and get to do a lot of different things every day. And that's huge for anyone to engage in a project or task. It also gives you these ideas of task identity, which has been very big for us, setting kids for leadership roles, but also setting different jigsaw projects and switching the degree of the jigsaw, meaning that you can be both responsible for a particular budget side within your team, but then you can coordinate with the budget folks from different groups of the competition working on this and have to both teach them about what your group is doing as well as teach your group about budgeting as a whole, allows you to develop a feeling of competency and that I'm a worthwhile part of this group and I have some true significance and I must get it done. It's very much related to the other one. Is there a task significance? Is there some value behind the kind of project that you're doing? And for this one, it's an easy example of both. There's utility for the other partners in your group of the competition, as well as the fact that there's a wider community that you're designing for and seeing the potential to build out these. The final two to note here that are important to have in the project design are the autonomy. And it's been very important for us in the design of how we're having students interact with each other and interact within their groups, is that we step back a bit and don't check in too much and allow mistakes to happen, and make room for surprises. And if they've failed for a while, that's okay, and we dig out into what the final product was, not some of the messiness that got there. And frankly, being able to provide very quick feedback, that we respond to submissions very, very quickly. And at the very end, we allow for feedback of personal, how do you think you did, the group to evaluate each other, and then finally, there's a need for an authority to put a stamp on it. Yeah, and eventually that sets up an interesting context and a reason why you can feel like you're naturally seeking a way to find to talk to people. And those things are huge to have out there. Are we doing okay? Dan, I see you muted everyone, unless they chose to mute themselves.
I just muted the folks that were being loud by accident.
What?
No, I mean, some folks are dropping off obviously because of time, but again, I'm here as long as you all want to be here, and nobody needs this virtual space for anything besides this webinar.
Cool. I just want to hit on some of these useful for now tools, and then I'm happy to answer some questions. I know I'm at 90% of my time already, or 150% of my time already. The useful for now part of it, it's worth noting, I put Skype down here in the title, although, Skype was 12 years ago that it came out, and that's both a long time and not a long time ago. It's only 5 years ago the iPad came out, and what's going to come out next year is a big question of what are we going to see out there in the world, that what is the chance of replacing the technology, replacing any of these tools. And so the idea of thinking of what is the one thing I need to know is in some ways the wrong mindset to have. It's what's good for now and what allows what's going to be valuable for students to get into now, and to be ready to find something else that you can switch to. Some useful for now ones, I do believe we're a heavy investor in the Google Apps Suite, simply because it has a wide array of interlocking features to get into. And it is something that is used on a professional basis for people across cultures, and every student needs to know how to use this, and it needs to be familiar with how to navigate around it and look at these different items. This one goes a little bit to Molly's question about what do kids use to talk to each other. I think the one I was missing on this was Snapchat, which is also a big one for the kids we work with now. There's a wide variety of different text messaging and video conferencing and talking platforms, and we're talking on Zoom right now. They all work okay, and they all are going to be the ones that are up here. If you see, WeChat's very big in China, Line is very big in Japan, KakaoTalk is very big in Korea, Viber has a certain segment of the world that is more popular. It almost doesn't matter. It's worth finding out what is the one that most people use and just going for that. A couple other small ones that we've used with students and that we recommend using. Slack is very good as a integrator of communications. It allows you to pull from all these guys and from different other places, and can allow students who are doing things in very separate ways to talk to each other. And Basecamp is a project management site and software that a lot of that's used for geographically distributed teams, mostly in the software development world. That makes sense, and it's a professional piece of software and professional thing for students to get into. The points that I want to make on this are: start with those professional tools for distributed work, let them learn to use things that matter, and gain some fluency in the things that are worth knowing how to do. but also to allow for what we call the tyranny of efficiency. If the reason is there, the technical challenge will be solved. Very honestly, if Zoom wasn't working for all of us, would say, hey, I'm sure Dan would drop an email, hey, what's everyone's Skype ID? Let's try that. Hey, let me set up a free conferencecall.com. And the wider a net that online courses, the wider net that your learning takes place. And we have these groups, as I mentioned, with Mobile Ed, who are in 5 different countries and high and low bandwidth places. It's not syncing everything into it has to have happened on this particular platform, but thinking, okay, if this doesn't work, what other ways are people using? What other means of communication do we have? And never quit learning, never stop looking for new places or assuming that this is the end, there's no way to talk to this person, because those technical challenges are always being solved. And if it hasn't been solved yet, then you can search for someone and ask and find out who's going to be working on it right away. Yeah. I wanted to stop there at least and cut through. I apologize for going a bit long. I'm happy to hang out and take some questions. Like I said, I didn't want this to just devolve. We've got more I could share, but I'm happy to send that out for any particular thing I covered or that you'd like to hear more of.
Seth, I want to thank you and everyone else. It was great to see, but I have to go meet my son's school bus, and they get really sensitive to unsupervised children. But thanks a lot, you guys, and I will. I'm sorry I can't stay longer and chat more.
Thanks so much, Ben. Happy to be in touch.
All right, thanks.
So thank you, Seth. I'm sorry I was a little loud. I take notes by doing screenshots, and I hope that you don't mind that I did that. I mean, any screenshot I took, I kept your little logo, the Envoy logo in the bottom. So if you heard me clicking, that's what it was. I wasn't taking pictures. I was kind of like, oh, I want to grab that. So.
Well, it's the other side of this kind of work and webinar. You know what people are doing or not doing for anything.
Seth, you're coming in a little quiet on my screen all of a sudden. I'm not sure if it's just distance or something.
Yeah, it might be the end. I was more talking than I gauged myself for an hour of talking. Yeah, I think it's fine. I'll say thanks to everyone. I know I appreciate you hanging around, and but I can also say bye to folks as well.
Thanks again. That was really interesting, really helpful list of tools. A lot of ones that I hadn't even realized existed or thought of using.
Yeah. It's been a big part of our work, and I think it's also one of the great, most inspiring things involved in this is that it's not a known field, and it's one that you can look at and test yourself and decide what works in your particular instance or not. Yeah.
I was curious about one of your slides. Were you saying that, do you use Adobe Mu or Muse? Is that what that was on?
Sure. Yeah. Some of the, I mean, we were showing some of the different course stuff that we've gone through, and we've designed a fair amount in Adobe Muse. I can show you some examples of the sites that get designed in that. It's what's used, and once you begin digging into it, you see it's what a lot of it's sort of a graphic designer's website making tool. And if you read, I think the New York Times uses it for a lot of their sites. It's what gives those large full pictures and the large full width videos, and then as you keep scrolling along, for a lot of articles. And it certainly has a very clean design aesthetic that can be done for presenting content.
Thank you. And the other thought I would just share, I don't know if you use this, our student staff uses something called GroupMe. I think it's called GroupMe, and that's what they use to communicate. And it's helped the people who supervise the staff. They don't need to supervise them all the time because they create solutions together with that little platform.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean the newness of these things is quite interesting, and also the specialization of this works for this group, this works for another. We use Slack a lot for our organization. That works great. Basecamp is one that we use both. Like we've got different designers who are based in different countries and different groups to work with. Basecamp is great for working with them, and it's been very interesting.
Great, thank you.
Well, I'll say, Dan, thanks for the opportunity to say a bit more. I had a very different set of things for the in-person one, but I thought for a webinar I'd try it in this way, and I hope it worked out okay for you guys. It's cool to be a part of meeting you a little bit. I know, strangely, it seems like a lot of us are in the New England area. It'd be great to meet up in person as well, perhaps at the next AEE or certainly before. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Yeah, I really appreciate you all joining us for this event. I think it's, just sort of representative of a direction that AEE is heading in terms of taking advantage of these kinds of technologies, opportunities. We have great conferences. We have the Journal of Experiential Education. We have a website that's pretty good and only getting better, but I think you're going to see a lot more of this type of material available, this type of content delivery, as well as y'all are just the only ones in the world who know this right now besides AEE staff, but we're looking at creating an online community for ourselves as well to really help keep people together when we're not at a conference. That is something I think that we need to work on, and through activities like this, we're getting better, and really appreciate your participation. This is the first time we've had a digital workshop in this way, and I'm pretty excited about the opportunity that it sort of allows for us. So thank you all for participating, and expect more in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and great job, Seth.
Yes. Bye.